Yes, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me this morning. So the question I was going to talk to today is really around sort of edge computing and hyperscale data centers. The question is it a symbolic relationship? Quick sort of 30 seconds just on Pulsant for those that don't know. We're a UK edge infrastructure platform provider. We've got 12 data centers around the UK, importantly, they're across an interconnected fabric, which gives us onward connectivity into through cloud on-ramps and provides sort of ultimately connectivity to any sort of compute, whether it's co-location or in our IaaS platform as well. So I'll just give you a little bit of background of where I guess I'm coming from with this. Okay. So I thought maybe just to kind of take us through this, we'd have a quick look at some of the history and hype cycles that we're probably all used to in our industry here. I think that's also got mentioned in a couple of the questions that came out about, are we in another technology bubble with AI and so on and so forth. So we'll kind of do a little bit of a dive into that. And as we do that, maybe I'll kind of introduce some themes around sort of data and connectivity to kind of keep in mind as we go through that. Talk a little bit about the growth in the edge market that we see, and ultimately kind of coming down to understand actually this is really about where your data sits and using the right platform for the right workload. Okay, so if I think back to sort of maybe early 2000s, and we all had our servers, our data, all in the office that nobody wanted to use, or the cupboard under the stairs, and we started to think about building out our server rooms and our enterprise data centers in some locations. The focus was very much around connectivity within ourselves, bringing our offices together, WAN and later MPLS, bringing our sites, and really our connectivity to the internet was kind of reaching out. It was kind of going out to different websites, making sure our own website was hosted correctly. And that we could get our clients to see our presence on the internet as opposed to actually really interconnecting beyond that. And I think that kind of started to kind of drive things like traditional data. So our databases, our file servers, and everything else was very much local to us from there. And we started then to sort of think about the introduction of cloud and I guess that was one of the more later hype cycles around public cloud and how we move into that. And we saw the drive towards more moving our equipment out of our own data centers into co-location data centers, starting to create applications and maybe moving our website out into hosted environments within cloud platforms like AWS and Azure. And with that, we have to think about where our data moves and how our connectivity is then dependent. So no longer do we need to necessarily connect between our offices, less important. It was more about how we kind of connected out through those data centers out onto the internet. With that, we still had some challenges. We had applications that were very dependent on being close to the data. So we would see technologies such as VDI and those remote desktops being driven. How do I keep my user close to that data? Because latency and retrieval of that information is absolutely key. Number of applications all sit with a database server behind them, and if there was any delay in that application requesting data, your users would see a problem. So you'd move the user closer to the data, but you're now doing that in a co-location data center. So we're starting to see that technology cycle as we kind of keep our users close to our data, but our data is now moving to different locations. And if I think about that today, that trend continues, but we've now got this kind of concept of a global fabric. We've got most of our data now is running in SaaS-based applications. Probably very few people run an Exchange server on-prem or in a data center anymore. We've moved to 365 or Google Mail or those equivalents. We've got a number of SaaS applications that we will use to drive our business, Salesforce or your CRM, all in the cloud, all in different places. So in terms of those themes about data gravity, connectivity, and latency, if you think about where your data sits now, it's no longer in that single server that was sat in the office that nobody wanted to use in there. It's no longer really sat necessarily in one co-location space, but it's in multiple co-location spaces across different clouds and different providers. And that's starting to drive the need for improved web application. The way we access that data changes, and the importance therefore of being able to connect to it from whether that's from your mobile phone, you're reliant on your mobile connectivity, or the actual connectivity within those data centers to make sure those servers can all interact with each other. Very few applications now work on their own. They will have a requirement to talk to another application, sync data between different SaaS providers, different SaaS applications. So we'll see those that need for connectivity and interconnected DC becoming more and more important. And I think I was just listening to a couple of the questions across the previous presentations there, and there is a drive in demand and a drive in power and a drive in sort of use of these things. But also we've got to keep in mind there's a reduction in the on-prem infrastructure that is now running with these things. So we are centralizing, as bizarre as that might sound, to these different places. So we are doing a lot more, but hopefully with sometimes less infrastructure as well as we do those things. So we're starting to see a change in shape of the underlying data center there, and become interconnected is now becoming absolutely key. Where's that relevant then? So if I think about growth in the edge market, the edge opportunity, edge is another one of those terms that kind of gets thrown around a little bit, and we're all kind of I think we all have a different view and a different opinion with it. But we are starting to see, the way I think about it is really about data generation, data aggregation. I sort of mentioned that term, data gravity. We are seeing growth in devices, whether that be wearables, our interaction with things that we're inputting into, IoT devices, smart cities, smart technology. Everything is now generating data and transferring data. And we did some sort of research into where we see that sort of growth. And there's, circa over the next sort of 4 to 5 years, £1 billion of additional addressable market opportunity across edge infrastructure requirements. We're certainly focused on those areas such as telecom, smart cities, and other sort of video analytics elements. But the growth and need to kind of get these things interconnected. Where's that data going to go? How are we going to access it? How are we going to process it? How are we going to make that data relevant to the questions that have been asked, and where is it going to sit? If you think about the scale of those IoT devices, you think about the connectivity that they're going to be reliant on, and if you think generally about our need and demand for instant access, and if I've got a decision to make, whether I'm an individual or it's a device, the response has got to be quick and it's got to be accurate. So we're starting to think about connectivity again. So latency, network performance are going to become key to these. So I guess the kind of how does all that kind of stick together? If I start to now think about that question that we come back to, and that relationship between hyperscale, DC, and edge compute, I think it's important to kind of look at how that data is going to flow, where it's going to be generated, and are reliant on different parts of technology. So if we think about the bottom of this triangle here, whether we're talking about people or IoT devices, generation of data now is happening all over the place. From how many times do you walk out of a shop or a facility and you're prompted for a bit of feedback on a display? How good was that for you? We're keying in, we're satisfied, dissatisfied. We're generating data all over the place. Any number of things that we're either wearing on our wrists or even now smart rings on your fingers, collecting, creating, transferring data. If we think about the number of smart devices that are going on, whether that be anything from the array of electric vehicles now that continue reading, collecting information, all connected, SIM connected to a mobile network. We've got a huge amount of data generation happening. All that is being transferred up through regional and very local connectivity points. Primarily now, we'll see that dependency on 5 and 6G and those things coming to bear there. We're seeing mobile providers start to think about how they break down that connectivity so that data isn't transferring right around the UK just to get back to its location, which is within maybe a few hundred meters of where it's been generated. We're starting to see those local access points and those local multi-access edge compute nodes happening within regional data centers now. So we're starting to kind of build this view of aggregated data. So data generation across wide breadth, all coming up and aggregating into key points, which typically happens, as I'm using the term here, regional edge. So we're starting to see the first elements of compute happening, data storage happening, all within that kind of regional edge piece from there. And that interconnectivity that I spoke to a moment ago about the interconnect DC starts to become more and more important. And then we've got the hyperscale and the kind of, I guess, cloud as an element from there. And we're starting to see some interesting things happening within hyperscale DC, certainly around the discussions we've had around AI and the intense or more intense power requirements, GPU factories, and so on and so forth. So we're kind of seeing a requirement to leverage that technology that's typically starting to shape and take place in the hyperscalers at the moment, but our data is kind of being generated on the ground and being transferred up through those technologies into our co-location, our regional data centers, and up into the wider cloud piece from there. So if we start to kind of lay that over onto an AI use case or example at the moment, how do I kind of see AI changing? And I think about sort of two concepts here. So we've got the AI producers and the AI consumers. And at the moment, we're seeing lots of excitement around, what potential AI can do. There was some, it's bringing some interesting challenges. And I think it was Alex's presentation started to talk about some of the elements around cooling and things that we'll have to think about as we go through that. But it's relatively small in number in terms of the use case. We're seeing lots of dependency on GPU. We're seeing investment in GPU hardware. And how do we see that sort of, I think I've used the term GPU factories across some of the, when I talk some of these things. But actually the use case within that is relatively small still, and it's relatively focused around some of these hyperscale DCs. And we're starting to see some early signs where it's interesting, it's useful. There's some great examples of creativity coming out of these AI producers, and can we create images of various things and mixed together? But the reality is they won't be the use cases that we'll see in the future. The AI consumer piece here is actually what will start to drive some requirements. We're starting to see now businesses think about actually how can I use AI. Very early sort of simple use cases about transcript of meetings and kind of doing some of the things that may have taken us a longer time to do, starting to speed up. But those use cases will grow. And if we now kind of sort of start to think about why I sort of planted that sort of theme of data and where does your data sit, we're going to have to scale that out, and it can't be dependent on those smaller number of hyperscale DCs. Our data is sitting within some of these regional edge places. It's sitting within some of the far edge places, within some of the compute nodes from there. There's an interesting statistic that I was reading a few weeks back, that there's something like 9 times more data sitting in private industries and private space, and that's kind of what was traditionally on-prem or that enterprise DC than there is available on the internet. So these use cases grow. It's that private data that will become absolutely key to making good use of this AI technology. I think it was earlier this year that NVIDIA was saying now they're seeing their business shift from what was predominantly sort of AI training and creating those language models. It's now sort of 70% inference. The term of inference AI comes up in terms of how do I kind of use that within my own private data. So we're starting to see that shift already. So as we start to develop our use cases, we start to kind of put our demands on AI, and we start to think about actually how can this be useful for my business? What can I do from there? And we need that scale. One thing's for sure within our sort of hype cycles and sort of technology bubbles that we go through is we start off and we require a lot of power, a lot of I guess a lot of energy going into these things, but that technology improves, chips become more efficient. The use case, whilst maybe more of them, is maybe smaller, so the demand on that performance isn't as great as it is at the moment. And we'll start to see things like we're already talking about from network technology, where we talk about the need for latency and speed. We will see devices starting to consolidate. So likes of optical networking, Ethernet networking coming into single devices, and we'll start to improve our efficiency because as we see that sort of growth in, I guess, chip efficiency and technology move forward from there. So I guess what I'm trying to show here is that we're moving to an AI consumer space. our requirements will grow. And within that, we'll be reliant on that underlying technology to improve its efficiency and actually where that technology will sit. So if you think about those large language models, the generative AI piece that we're seeing in the hyperscales today, if we think about our data being generated, out at the far edge and the regional edge, and where that data is stored across co-location and private space. And I thought maybe one way to kind of bring that together and is to kind of think about the need to augment that. And actually, with the term that we'll start to kind of become more familiar with is RAG, retrieval augmented generation, in terms of AI, and how that actually these things will come together. And maybe just kind of use that to kind of maybe just frame the answer to that question about the symbolic relationship between edge and hyperscale. And I don't talk to you today as an expert in any of these technologies, but just as a principle, it seems to resonate with me on how actually these things need to come together and won't necessarily sit just in one space. So RAG is the principle of actually how do we bring together some of that capability within the generative AI space that's going on at the moment, and actually accessing some of that maybe private data or real-time data that's getting generated. And if you think about a device or a user query that comes in, expecting an answer through AI technology, you're going to see some of that query being translated into a way that can be referenced in those language models that have been generated in those GPU factories and hyperscale DCs, and they're going to be able to relate that into something that can be augmented with data that comes from that private data source or that real-time data source. And that real-time data source is really important because actually that interconnected fabric comes into key. If you put a request in and you're waiting, 20, 30 seconds, that's an age in this day and age. So that's got to be rapid and quick, and it will get augmented with that large language model that comes through, and will generate the response from that AI app. And within there, that will then get fed back to the user. So you can start to see actually the importance now of where that data is sitting. And if I go back to sort of the top of my deck, and you think about your own business and where your where your data is sitting today, it is in multiple locations, I suspect. You'll know where it is. You'll probably have access to it. You'll have the ability to get that. You may still have your own private data sets in there. But how am I going to use that in a way with AI and benefit from the advantage of AI? And the reality is you're going to need resource from hyperscale DCs, hyperscale compute. You're going to need your own resource within your own maybe co-location space or your own cloud space that you've got. And those things will start to come together. So yes, this isn't one or the other. For me, this is about actually understanding where your data sits, how well are you connected, and actually what's the right tool for the right job, which is probably the things we do most of our day to day. So yes, it's not one or the other. I think you'll start to see a lot more of this augmented reality, or augmented generation. Augmented reality is maybe another topic for another day. Come through and use of both edge compute along with hyperscale DCs as well.
Thank you very much, Mike. And again, we always appreciate you trying. We set these questions that are impossible to answer, so appreciate you trying to give us an overview of what's some very complex topics. Just going back quickly as a first sort of question, I know you spoke about AI, and AI is going to come up constantly over the next few days, I'm sure, but do you think we are keeping pace with the proliferation of AI, and how rapidly the uptake on a consumer point of view, using all these different types of AI? Do you think we're keeping pace, and if not, what's the industry going to be doing to keep on top of it over the next few years?
I think we're at that. It's the start of that curve, and
yeah.
We've had some, and again, even this morning already, so starting to see some good conversation around sort of the demands on power and things like that. So, yes, I think in short, we are keeping pace, but actually the bit I would focus back on is actually the use case and what are we trying to keep pace with at the moment.
Yeah.
We've got an exciting technology driving some exciting challenges, and as we, with any of these things as we go through, we have to kind of understand them, explore them, and know how to. So we're in an important phase of getting there. I think the reality that will kind of come in is that we will see those improvements in efficiency. We will see those use cases driving more breadth and more scale that way. So actually, what we're doing now and the place we're at is understanding how to I guess, how to drive that technology, but it will become
Yeah.
more consumable. Yeah, but I'm kind of waiting for the not necessarily the penny to drop, but almost, what is the the key use cases that businesses want to see
Yeah.
out of that, and
Yeah.
things like chatbots and things always get reference to that, but we'll start to see the benefit of the technology come through soon.
Brilliant, thank you. What are the security implications of integrating edge computing with hyperscale data centers, and how can it be mitigated?
Yeah, really good question. And I think if it's probably something that's top of my mind when I think about that concept of the early, sort of one of the first slides I had there, the sort of pre-2010, where we were thinking about WAN and private networking, and actually it was by exception that you allowed people into your data. We've kind of gone the other way now, and actually everything's available on a kind of a public network or a publicly available SaaS application. So the sort of perimeter security that we used to sort of think about and talk about doesn't really exist anymore. And what's interesting with this is going to be some of the technologies that come in, like the zero trust access, where actually you assume no access, and actually you've then got a purpose, or the application will have its permitted security for what it needs at that time, and then it stops again. So we're going to have to really think about how do we maintain that level of security over what's fundamentally going to be a very open public network across all these different applications. And I think anyone looking at their models, looking at how do they make use of this, it's always good when we're on a sort of technology development and taking advantage of it, but that some of those principles that we've learned, certainly in recent years now around our secure by design, our presence around cyber, they shouldn't be forgotten. They've got to come first in everything that we do.
Thank you. Just one more question, if I may. What training or skill development should be provided for IT staff managing both edge and hyperscale data center environments?
Another good question, really. So I think if you depends where you're aiming at, right? So if we're talking about the from a data center perspective, which it would apply across both, a lot of our underlying technologies haven't really changed. We've got to store data, we've got to process data, we've got to transit data, we've got to power all of the technology that does that. So some of those kind of core skills about how we run our data centers, how we manage them, haven't really changed. What I think we need to kind of start focusing on is awareness of that. Some of there was a comment, I think, on the earlier presentation around sort of data centers as sort of not energy producer as such, but being very aware of kind of the energy that they are consuming and producing. So for me, there's an awareness piece around that sustainability and understanding what we're doing. How can we drive efficiency in everything that's in there? Asking those right questions about right from sort of our design of our data centers through to the running of it. Are we driving the right decisions, and efficiency being key for that. And I think around the application space coming down the other way, there's an interesting piece around, I guess, in terms of those training models, that sort of data and data analytics and the importance of that. So there's a bit around is AI replacing some of the sort of current roles today, but actually I think there's a big skill set and need around understanding what happens within that processing at edge and within the hyperscale around AI. So I think the need for sort of data analysts and data scientists actually start to grow within our space as well.
So it's sort of looking at everything from the big picture rather than in silos. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mike. That was really insightful. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for
Thank you.